All right, everybody, welcome. I know that there will still be some people joining this event, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for being here and joining today's event, exploring the connection between land and language. My name is Stephanie Witkowski. I'm the Executive Director of 7,000 Languages, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering communities around the world to teach, learn, and sustain their endangered languages. Before we begin, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that I live and work on. So I'm here, I live and work on the stolen lands of the Tongva and the Ahachiman people. And despite centuries of colonial violence, the Tongva and the Ahachiman people are still here today, and they work diligently and passionately to restore and to revitalize their languages and cultures. We encourage everybody who's here at the event today or listening in to learn more about the land and the languages where you are. One way you can do that is by going to www.native-lands.ca. At 7,000 Languages, we are just honored to be partnering with Terralingua for this event today. Terralingua is an organization that is truly at the forefront of promoting an understanding of the inherent connection between the biological and cultural diversity. And they really have done so much work in this area for decades now. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce Dr. Louisa Maffei, the director and the co-founder of Terralingua. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Maffei. She will be the host of our event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie, and for that introduction, and thank you to our speakers today for being here and guiding us through this fundamental topic that indeed has been at the core of the work of Terralingua for the past 25 years. The idea of biocultural diversity, the interlinked and interdependent diversity of life in nature and culture is an idea that we began to explore 25 years ago, but it's an idea that was second nature and continues to be second nature to First Nations and Indigenous peoples around the world. That language, land, and culture, traditional knowledge are all one thing, and that indeed the languages and the cultures and the values and cultural and spiritual values of Indigenous peoples around the world are come from the land, from Mother Earth. So we only picked up the thread and thought that it was something crucial that the majority of people around the world have really forgotten or never learned about, and so we made it our goal to explore these interconnections and to educate people about them. So we ourselves wish to acknowledge that we are on the unceded and indeed stolen lands of Saanich people, the Cowichan people, the Penelakut people here in this corner of British Columbia, and other Coast Salish First Nations. But just like Stephanie mentioned, we don't feel that acknowledgements are enough without recognition of the historic and even contemporary injustices and indeed often atrocities that have been perpetrated against Indigenous peoples and that have led to the spoliations of their lands, to the threats to their languages and cultures, and without a sense of commitment to helping change that by educating people about these historic circumstances and do whatever we can to help redress those injustices by changing misperceptions, misinformation, and fostering respectful and supportive relationship with Indigenous communities in British Columbia and indeed worldwide. That said, I think that there couldn't be any better day than today worldwide to talk about the connections between land and language. Interestingly enough, the United Nations declared May 21st the International Day for Cultural Diversity, and May 22nd the International Day for Biodiversity. And we noticed this and we thought, oh, here's a disconnect. We should put those two together, and we should have International Day for Biocultural Diversity, because land and language are inextricably intertwined. And so we decided that we would have our informal International Day of Biocultural Diversity today, and we are absolutely delighted to be able to have with us today two language warriors. That's the only way that I can describe EDİLISİYE from the Saanich First Nation, and Jaskwaan from the Haida First Nations, both in what is now British Columbia. They will take us through this topic of language and land from their respective perspectives. EDİLISİYE will go first, and Jaskwaan will come second, and they will have 20 minutes each to talk about what they're doing in their respective communities. But before I pass it on to both of them, I wanted to note that this is also the first year of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages that was declared by the United Nations again. And I happened to notice something really interesting when I picked up my latest issue of Canadian Geographic, which is the magazine produced by the Canadian Geographic Society, the equivalent of the National Geographic Society in the US. And they have a statement from the point of view of geographers about language and land. And I couldn't say it better, I found out. It's a very succinct statement, so I will just read it to you. Human and physical geography are inherently intertwined. Distinct languages and cultures make the human landscape diverse. In turn, these distinct languages are and always have been shaped by the physical landscape where speakers live. Geographers, and all of us, have the opportunity to read, understand, and interpret the unique and varied relationships between the land and its inhabitants by seeking to understand the teachings within the language and learning from the first peoples of respective territories and geographic regions through the languages that shape them. Indigenous languages are living languages, sourced from the lands, expressing Indigenous creation stories, thriving in the ancient ceremonies and daily lives of Indigenous peoples. I think it's really well stated. And on that note, I pass it on to EDİLISİYE for her presentation. Thank you.
So I kuchil hela isen kunis kunanga etla tias chalaith and tias gepelta. So EDİLISİYE thanesne Tisla etla tia tongochat husetnich, tisla aguchini huchathal, Ethan a salsila tisla kawachin, eat umenes. Awasu heathly chakwas tatanochat the squels da. Su chilat tus at the squels at na sila la. Ethan na shhueli awasu chakwas at the Sanchathan squels, the la caminum squels. So na ste na sa itlaksil ang at the squels. At na ngana the stalikas etla te setnich. So first of all, I just want to say hello to everybody here on this Zoom, and I go by EDİLISİYE. in the work that I do, and a name given to me from our elders, hummingbird women, because they said that was my work ethic, like a hummingbird. And anybody that knows me well. I am quite like the hummingbird, flying here and there.
Mm.
But what I was mentioning also is that my grandparents come from here, from Husetnich, but also from Couch and what they call Chimenes. And the biggest thing that I always acknowledge, and my parents acknowledge, is that my mother and father call themselves the lost generation. It was their generation that was the language, and a lot of the cultural teachings were not passed, because out of my four grandparents, three of them went to residential school at Cooper Island and I believe Port Alberni. And so the intergenerational trauma has hit really hard in our family here. And so the biggest thing that I said that my journey has been is to honor, my grandparents by picking up and weaving together the language that was literally beaten and ripped from them. And when we come to gatherings within our family household, my late grandfather would get moved to tears to hear, myself and my children speaking the language. And he would always mention that once he did know his language, and that it was beaten out of him. And so every step I take, I think of my grandparents, and continuing on this, I feel like steps towards Sinchothan freedom for them, because they tried to extinguish us as Huilnguch people, but they did not succeed. And so with that, I started my language journey as an adult. I did not grow up with the language. I did not grow up with a lot of cultural teachings. And so when it was time for me to figure out who I was and my identity, I sought out different opportunities to be close to the language. And when I was carrying my first daughter, that's when my life really changed, and I really sought out and was hungry for language. And so I was about 21 when I started learning the language, and from there, with my partner and his beautiful family, they really took me underneath their wing. That's Jasington, John Elliott, and my partner Penechwang, and started to mentor my father-in-law, and joined an apprenticeship. So I was the first one of the first apprentices at States in the Sinchothan at the State School Board. I spent 10 hours with elders a week. Well, actually, I was paid for 10 hours a week, but I spent way more. A lot of us language peoples know we do more than we get paid for. And it was really a bridging for youth to connect with elders, because in our communities before, it was normal for youth to go visit elders and visit around in the homes, but there's a lot of severance from those residential schools. And what I was always told, and it was hit really hard in Saintnich, that we had communities without children because they were all taken away to residential school, and the ones that didn't go to residential school went out to our Gulf Islands. And so this was a apprenticeship that was a bridge, and that's what states and means. It's like it was a board where our leaders would have going into their houses, and at a time of peace, back in the ancient times, children would play on it, and you could hear the whumping sound like a trampoline, and you'd know that there was a lot of peace. But also it was also a signal to our leaders in times of war. So it was a significant bridge and metaphorical bridge of peace, and a metaphorical a bridge of us being able to connect to our language in our ancient ways. And I have three daughters, Talicia, Liquithia, and Thailia. And we decided to name them Sinchothan names, no English names, only their last names, because we wanted them to start, their lives rooted within their own cultural identities. And it's been a journey for us. And they've grown up in different stages in our lives of language revitalization. And it was really beautiful, last summer, that we were able to go to Skthak, which is Main Island, and my daughter worked at this little tiny museum there, and we we we were in our village all summer. We were in one of our homelands all summer, and just getting waking up to the crashing waters, waking up to the smell of the beautiful forests, and having my children know the feeling of and go to where our ancestors have gone. And so with that, my work, I wear many hats. I'm a Sinchothan immersion instructor in our Saint Leadership Secondary School. I am a professor in the Sinchothan East language revitalization diploma program in partnership with UVic. I'm also an instructor in the Sinchothan Bachelor's of Education program. I am also the Sinchothan program facilitator at the St. School Board for their immersion programs. I am also, I do different contracts for curriculum and resource development, and I'm just a total geek for language revitalization. So last week, a part of my role as an instructor for the Saint Leadership School was to take out some youth to our homelands. And so we have a program called Elanganok, Learning from the Homelands. And the biggest thing that we want to do is connect our children, our students back to place. And so a lot of our community is still living in lots of poverty. A lot of our community is still, just now on their healing journey, or just not quite there yet on their healing journey from the intergenerational traumas of colonization here in Saitnich and all over Turtle Island. So a lot of our beautiful children have not ever gone, on a boat or gone to some of our beautiful islands. And so in partnership with Living Labs, I was able to be a part of this beautiful project with Dr. Nick Stanger, where we were able to have a partnership between the Western Washington University and St. Nick School Board and the Hlami White Swan conservative program to come together like we did with our Lummi relatives, and to camp, to pray, to sing, to dance, to share food, to share gifts like we always have. And so that was a beautiful thing we got to do out at Kamung, which is Susia Island. I believe it's north of the San Juan Islands. I believe a week ago now. So we took a bunch of youth out there. And what was really beautiful, I was on the last boat over there, is when we arrived, it I don't know if anybody knows where Susia is, but if you think of your hand, you think of it just like a hand stretched out like this. So in between each finger is a bay. It's a really magical place, is a bay. And so each bay is different. There's Fossil Bay, and there's actually fossils there. So you're walking, and one of my friends picked up a rock, and there's like a fossil there. And it's a really magical place. There was actually a T-Rex found there, I was told. And it's called Tlilkamung, and Tlilkam in our language means mussels. And what we found, there wasn't a lot of mussels around on the beach, but in the middens, there was lots of mussels in the middens. And so when we pulled in, just backtracking, we were met by our Kotlalamachin. We were met by the orcas. It could have been, any time of the day or anything. They weren't around the whole time, but we were met. And so I just acknowledged our Kotlalamachin, the Orca Shwalakwa, the Orca family there. And the beautifulest thing I felt was it was a bunch of teenage orcas. It looked like teenager, young, and one um, older orca. And I was thinking, wow, we're bringing a bunch of youth over, and they swam around, and I acknowledged them, and I sang them a song and just let them know our relatives, that we're here visiting this land. It's been a long time since Saint people has camped and visited there, especially with our relatives, with our Hlami relatives. And so when we got there, we were greeted by song. And through this whole experience with our relatives, with our youth, feeling something in one area, feeling presence, feeling of sadness, feeling of something. And we're like, what's going on? And then finding out that there was a burial ground in one of these places. So we removed everybody away from there, and we did our ceremonial and cultural ways that they're supposed to, because the rangers just wanted to block it off, take the remains of our ancestors and do the non cultural way. And we said, no, we got to do this our way. We got to do this the Hlami way. We got to do this Satanich way and take care of it in a good way. And at the same time that these feelings were going on, the weather was really, really blowing. The wind was blowing, everything was blowing. Is our tents were like going over like this. And so once we did the work of our ancestors, and I won't get too much into that, but once we did the work of our ancestors, you wouldn't believe it. The weather changed, the sky changed, the feelings changed. The youth who are really connected to our great creator, those feelings were uplifted, and we're able to conduct our stay and our visit with our relatives in a really good way. And what does that say? What does that say to you? I was thinking that, like, wow, and the kids felt it too, the energy, the connection. It's been a long time since our youth and since the island have engaged in I don't know, a reciprocal love of one another. I can explain, I don't know how to explain it. But one thing the elders were telling us is to chakwasan squil ethlatia tango, chakwasa squils atas jasananuk, atas delnochta. Use the language of the land, of the medicine, the plants. Use the language because they will need to hear it. A very ancient place, and they really need to hear the language because it is medicine for not only yourself to be walking amongst the forest with and grabbing the trees and the plants hands and grasping them, like you're grasping somebody's hand, giving acknowledgement and thanks. But they need to hear our Sanshathan language just as much as a human being, because they are our relatives. And it goes back to our origin stories, and especially our tl'tleches, the relatives of the deep. And in our beliefs, and it's not just a story, and that's what our elders always say, I'm thinking of them. It's not just a story, it's our beliefs. We believe that when our great creator came, he took our relatives and he threw them out into the ocean, into the Shkwana, and he said, that's what our great creator said. Watch out, take care of our relatives. And if you look at the word, right, it means the relatives of the deep. because they are our relatives, just like the Kathlalamachin are our relatives. And when we're there, we need to take care of one another. And so that was the most recent excursion out to Tlilkamung. I think that another thing that was a beautiful thing was teaching and just role modeling, the importance of being mindful of where you are. So yesterday, I took my girls up to Tlilkamung. It was dark, you know, and I'm not in shape, so we wanted to I wanted to take my three daughters up to our sacred mountain, Tlilkamung, um, to watch the sunrise and give acknowledgement and thanks, and have a stiwith, have a prayer there for our elders, our language, and for themselves to be one. And so we went up there yesterday to Tlilkamung, and we're looking out to the east and giving our acknowledgements. And the sun was rising, but the moon was still there. And I looked over to the right, and on Seut, we're having our longhouse rebuilt. It was there was a tragic fire, and our longhouse burnt down, and so they're close to finishing it. They're just doing some final touches on the doors, and it was just a beautiful sight, and just to be there with my daughters, because it was a really special thing for me. And another thing is there with her auntie, and just giving that experience, because I never got that experience, for waking up with the day, having the words to connect with our great creator. And that's something that I wanted to be able to do, is to be able to be able to speak in our own language to our great chilts. And so I was really happy about that, sore today, but happy about being able to bring our daughters to that Tongocht, our sacred place there on our beautiful mountain. And if you think about other experiences with youth, getting them, to cleanse themselves, early in the morning with our water, and giving these experiences that are ancient experiences once again, is a really beautiful, important thing to continue on, that our elders wanted us to continue on. And just knowing that a lot of families are still haven't let that go, but also giving, other students the opportunities to partake in these, because not a lot of us had that, due to intergenerational traumas. So that's something I'm glad to be a part of. One of the beautiful things also that I'm able to be a part of is teaching young adults the language. So I mentioned before that we have a Husinchothanist program at the Husseinot School Board that's in partnership with the University of Victoria. But this is an opportunity for us to share language, not just in the classrooms, but out on the land, because there's a different terminology, there's a different feel of the language when you're out there walking on the land. And someone asked me the other day about, spirit, talked about my spirit. And one of the things I was thinking about, when you think about yourself and you're on a healing journey, you think about your role and everything in life, and you're a mother, you're a friend, you're a partner, you're everything. But what about yourself? You always got to think about yourself. And so I was thinking about that, and I said, well, I think my spirit, Nestle, is really entangled with song, for me in my life. Song, stilum, has been really um, a healing journey for me. And what does that mean? It means that for me, as a Xétnich woman, that when I'm out on the land, I get songs that float in with the wind, or they come in with the tide, or they come in with children humming when I'm out there walking them when I was a kindergarten teacher, or they come down with the rain. And so that's been something that's been really a beautiful gift, that I've been able to share, with my students, with my family, and with my community. And that sometimes, when I'm out there spending time on our territories, like Sneakwith, for example, walking with the children in the light, mist of our rain, on our faces, will generate a song like Slamoch, which is the first man that came down with the rain in Xétnich that helped Great Crater Hills create a lot of our territories as well. And just being a language learner, I feel like I'm still, I have so much to learn. Um, these words and these songs come to me, and I created a song, and I was really afraid to share it, and I was being kind of I guess, being kind of shy, backwards about it, but brought it forward, and the beautiful children created a dance, and uh, in honor of the first man, Slamoch, that came down at Sneakwith, and that's our first ancient village. And so that didn't come from me. That came from place. That came from the land. That came from that moment there with the children. And I really believe that, that connectedness goes further than the scientific, I guess, ways, because it's really the spiritual connectiveness of your Shkwelaquin, which Shkwelaquin is like your heart and your mind, and being able to have those experiences out on the land. And so I think that we need to just have the opportunities, to have presence on our territories. I mentioned, us being able to freely travel with our people, with our students, with our families across the borders. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to be able to get to our homelands without any tension or struggle through the US border and things. Like, there's a lot of work. We have the G Treaty, we have the things like that are supposed to support us, but there's still all these challenges. There's still a lot of work to do for us to be able to go to places on our territory. So, for example, just on Friday, we're at Scotheman, which is Scotheman is Sydney Island, Sydney Spit area, and that isn't across the border. That's just like a boat, like a paddle away. It's really close, but there's just so many challenges with private owners and parks sometimes, but parks wants to work. Some of them, want to work in a partnership to help preserve or get our indigenous species back to land. But it's really difficult when we have, how can I say it nicely? We have like private owners that aren't willing to cooperate for things such as the fallow deer, for example. So the fallow deer are a big problem on that island because they literally wiped out everything. They're non-indigenous deer, and I was joking around calling them a gang because they go in herds. But what I quickly wanted to mention was that they wiped out basically all the plants, all the indigenous plants off of Statement, which is Sydney Island. And there, in the last, I guess, 7 years, there's been a lot of work to do a big hunt for the fallow deer, and I think there's about 300 to 500 still left on the island. But since that big hunt, there's birds again. There's birds back on that. You can hear the birds singing on the island. There was no birds. There was nothing. And they've also done some research and built some fences in and to see, what would grow back, like the indigenous plant, and it grew back. So a lot of the plants and everything are growing back. And so it just blows my mind when the simple fixes would be, to bring back the indigenous animals and bring back the indigenous plants to help beautify the land once again naturally. But it's a few people, privileged people, that hold the key for that important work that needs to be done to revitalize the island, because they want to hunt deer, non-indigenous deer. So anyways, I could go on forever about that, but it really hit home to hear those deer, those EDÄLISIYE, those birds, the ones that sing with their heart, once again on that island. So Haishka.
Thank you so much, EDÄLISIYE. I can hear from the emotion in your voice that that journey, that healing journey, is not just a mind journey, it's a heart journey, it's a spiritual journey, and we're all the richer for what you and your community are doing. Thank you very, very much from the heart. And now, without further ado, we'll pass it on to Jaskwaan, who's speaking to us from EDÄLISIYE. Jaskwaan.
Hawa Delang Ash Kiltlagen, Jaskwaan Hanu Di Kyang, Cheatskitten Studi Iskagn, Sandlane Hanu Di Non Kagan, Skuljade Hanu Di Non Kagan, Anna Hanu Di Non Kagan, Kunajat Hanu Di Au Kyang, Ayat Di Goodinge La Uslang, EDÄLISIYE Gush Ijung. So Hawa for having me here, and I was very moved by what's been shared so far today. So my hands up to the work that's being done in your territory, and the story that you shared with your language journey and the work that you're doing in your community. And I would like to, appreciate anyone who's here today who does work in their community to uphold, languages, place names, and our beautiful lands and waters that we share. or that we rely on here. And I'm very honored to be asked to be here and speak a bit about my own language journey. I actually, my story parallels what's been shared already today. In many ways, I'm an adult language learner as well. I grew up hearing many words of endearment and colloquial terms in my language, but it seemed very unattainable to me. My grandmothers spoke it, and my father went to the day school in our village of Old Masset, also known as EDÞELISIYE, and he spoke our language. He was raised by his grandparents up until going to that day school, and spoke Haida, Hodkill. But then that interruption happened because of the violent nature of that place, and what it did and represents for our community is really the removal and oppression and violence indeed against our children and our ability to express ourselves in our language that we were born with, that many of us were born with, and my dad was one of them. So I grew up speaking English predominantly, and I love to hear our language. The few times I was able to be exposed to it, around my grandparents' table. They passed, when I was young. I know, so when I had opportunity later in life to learn my language and pass it on to my own children, I recognized the privilege I had, and that was a privilege that many in our community, including my father, didn't have, to learn and communicate and speak and pass on our way of communicating. Now, Hodkill is the Old Masset dialect of the Haida language. There are many dialects of the Haida language. Currently, there are 3 recognized dialects: Haida Kill in the south, Hodkill here in the north, and Hodkill as well with our Southeast Alaskan relatives, our Is Hade, Tulang, our cousins from Alaska. And the multiple villages that were once here in northern Haida Gwaii each had their own dialect known as Hodkill. And when we all came together after the great death due to introduced smallpox in the late 19th century, we came together in the north here in what became known as Masset or Old Masset, and then in the south, what became known as Skidegate. Now, what is now Old Masset is actually many different place names, and we call it now EDÞELISIYE, land around the inlet, and Skidegate is Gilda Unligay, but it is known as Skidegate. So Hodkill is a language isolate, meaning that it's a family upon itself. So we're very unique language with a unique history, goes back many thousands of years, and our stories bring us back to the supernatural times. I'm really thankful for the stories that still are with us and that are held in really interesting places, because there was such a concerted campaign for the removal of our connection to our language, to our way of thinking, and to our land. And that's the big piece, is just removal from this way of thinking that really makes us aware of our history, of where we came from, of our land around us, of who we are as Haida people. Taking that away from us is such a great injustice. So I really hold up the people in our nation and those who came before me, who did a lot of work to ensure that knowledge and this way of thinking is passed along. Right now, there are very few first language speakers in my dialect. In fact, there are less than 5. So the work that I do is to create more speakers. And I really want to give a lot of freedom and have a lot of positive momentum in my community to encourage people to think of speakers as just this big range, this big ability. If we say what we know in Hudkill, regardless of how little we may think it is, it's us speaking our language. And so it's really, really important to me to kind of really meet and try and counter this narrative of disappearance and loss, because we want to come at it from this empowered perspective. Because what has happened is an assumed ownership through this colonial process of our lands and territories as well, that removes us from this really powerful source of our identity, our connection and relationship with the land. And that is what the goal ultimately of the residential school, so-called school initiative, was to remove us from this culture of living with our territory. So I recognize that the work that I do to reinstate and to empower and strengthen our knowledge around language, I'm part of a big puzzle of people who want to continue this really strong piece of our identity that shows us, who we are in this world as Haida people. And we're all just, we understand the more we learn of our language, just how everything is connected to everything else. So we've really battled over the years, hearing over and over again, number one, how difficult our language is to learn, how we have, fewer and fewer speakers, and that our language is disappearing and almost dead. And so for the 20 years I've been working in language revitalization, that same narrative has been with us. And so I'm really looking to flip that narrative and to showcase the strength that we've always possessed with the knowledge that that is intrinsic to who we are as Haida people. And there's interesting pockets of where this knowledge is held. And one of the beautiful projects, many beautiful projects I've been a part of, includes place name project. And we've been restoring our Haida place names on many different levels here in our community, including at a provincial level, a partnership there where they're doing the right thing and working with us to reinstate our place names, which hold and encapsulate so much information about the shape of the land, the history of the land. There's stories out in our territory, as well as the other characteristics. And so I find it really beautiful work. I work in the school district as a Haida language teacher and cultural curriculum implementation teacher, as well as I teach through Hudkilne, our Haida language office. We have a partnership with the Simon Fraser University Indigenous Languages program, where I look to build language skills for mostly adult learners who are looking to learn and speak our language as adults. And so we have a series of courses aimed towards beginners and intermediates. And we also have immersion programming, which I'm very proud of, especially these past few years, where we've developed a mentorship between intermediate learners and beginner learners in this immersion setting. So out in our beautiful Alung, which is up in the northwestern tip of Haida Gwaii, and is home to a rediscovery program, the original rediscovery program, for those who might know that organization. So the English name of the area is Lepus Bay, but we know it as Alung. And we we're in longhouses in our Hodsnay, and we have living on the land, hauling water and getting our firewood and packing in our food and everything else we need. And we really work to, tell our stories and sing our songs and follow our protocols, and at the same time kind of hold each other up and recognize those of us who were privileged enough to learn from our elders when they were with us. There's a group of about 15, and we always wonder, what are we going to do next? What are we going to do when our elders leave us? And this is what we have the responsibility to do, to pass along what they shared with us to others. And although there's a wide scale out there of what, what fluency means, and what a speaker is. And so I really feel like for our community and for where we are now, we just put that aside. We're not worried about who's who and what's what in that regard, in the scale of of rating how people speak our language. It's just focused on, we are all going to get better together if we just take the little we know, because we understand that the first language speakers that we were able to learn from, they have this vastness of understanding of our language that we can look upon and understand that it will come to our children with this work that we're doing, and know there's a humble aspect of this work where we don't know what we don't know in our language. I understand the complexity of it. There's upwards of 33 different tenses and all these different verb types. We're a verb-based language. So complex and beautiful the way that our ancestors created this language in response to their relationship to the world around them. And that's what makes our language so unique. It was crafted, by our land here, and every single Indigenous language is the same way. And so, I recognize my responsibility that I've been handed over with my opportunity to learn from the elders that I did learn from, including EDÞELISYYE, Chinny Stephen Brown, Jaskwaan, Nani Mary Swanson, Nani Bibsy, Primrose Adams, who I did a 3-year mentorship with, amongst many others who I was fortunate enough to hear and spend time with. Now, we have multiple programming at our language office that we kind of started from just a little tiny closet, essentially, in our community. Many communities understand there's no core funding for language, so we just have to have a grant-based system that run our programs. A lot of volunteer work, as we heard too. It's across the board. That's how many language offices operate, just on the love for the community and the work that we're doing, and being able to capitalize on what is out there to support successful language teaching and preservation and programming. So I find the context of language learning is so important. Many years our language domain actually was moved to the classroom. Our language program in the school district 50 here is about 40 years running, but there are multiple issues with that. The classroom setting is really difficult to learn Indigenous languages, and our language in particular, without that context. And of course, we can really make this difficult, programming and continuity in that system has proven, that it needs a lot more from community, that can be one space where we have language, but we understand that building people's skills to teach and speak and hear the language in their homes, as well as when they're out on the land, really integral are the same. We are battling a lot of different issues that have gone hand in hand with this removal that was spoken about as well so succinctly earlier. This removal of our children, this removal from our land, put onto reserves, this removal of our language and our place names. So that restoration work is all connected. What we are doing, restoring our place names, we have hundreds of thousands of place names that cover this archipelago of Haida Gwaii that showcase our time here, our relationship here. But if we look at a map, put together by the province of British Columbia or the country of Canada, it could look like a very sparsely populated, very few place names type of island with a lot of English names attached to areas that have nothing to do with our history or the place itself. So we do that work. And as well as just education, right? Not only for the Haida people who really want to learn and reconnect to this knowledge of their families and those who came before them, but people who come to live here and be a part of these communities. It's not just by location where they come to understand this really unique history and relationship and language, and how important it is for justice in terms of land back, in terms of indigenous and decision-making power, and which we've come very far as the Haida Nation, but there's still very far to go in terms of justice for what's been done on these lands and territories, and also what's been done to our language. So it is all connected, and it's very important to be aware of how everything is connected. And many times I want to just concentrate on teaching the language to my 3 children. And strengthening the language in myself, but I feel called to promoting and assisting and shaping this community programming and resources that make that same type of path available to others, because within it is a pathway to healing in terms of this big scar that can be still open as a result of the colonizing violent process that happened here and many other places. So Hawa for listening, and Hawa for having me here. And I learned a lot today as well. So I appreciate everyone who's here.
Thank you so much, Jaskwaan. Another really passionate statement, and another incredible journey of the heart and the spirit. And you've shown us very clearly what the violent separation, colonial separation of Indigenous peoples from their lands, their cultures, their languages has done, but also the unstinting, incredible determination that First Nation have had to go on that healing journey, to counter that rhetoric of language and culture endangerment of the last speaker. Anybody can be a speaker, no matter how many words of their language they know at any one time. It is a journey, and we're all the richer for it. Thank you both for inspiring us today. We're almost out of time, but there may be questions from our audience, and so let's see if anybody wants to come in with questions or comments, and Stephanie will manage that. So over to you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't see any questions coming in. Really, just what a wonderful, what wonderful talks you both gave, and I feel very, very full right now in my heart, and I want to thank you both so much for sharing your story and sharing your time with us today. And thank you for everybody who came here to gather as we celebrate, as we've coined it, Biocultural Diversity Day. And I hope that continues on after here, but this is truly inspirational. So truly from the bottom of my heart, I wish to thank our speakers, EDİTHELISIYE and Jaskwaan, and of course our partner Terralingua in this event for hosting with us today. We really are blessed to have this partnership. We'll be following up with an email. We will post this recording. Thank you all so much. I hope everybody also feels inspired today. And of course, we invite you to join us at Terralingua at 7,000 Languages and learning more about language revitalization and about this really deep, intrinsic, beautiful connection between language and land. So
yeah,
with
and I'm
that,
sure that the people who have been in the audience today might be, love to connect also with our speakers. And I see that EDİTHELISIYE has already sent a number of links. Jaskwaan, if you want to do the same so that people can learn more and maybe get in touch with you, I'm sure that there will be a lot of interest and gratitude for that. And again, thank you both very much. It was so eloquent, beautifully stated, and so moving that I'm choking up.
I did see a question in the thread about what can somebody do to help, or if someone would like to help, what would you suggest, like for language revitalization in general, or for where you are geographically? What I always just say is like we've been working a lot on another project called Tlaitchis also with islanders out on the Sadeas, Pender, Tluktuksin, Saturna, and Skthak main island. And so what islanders are non-Kusatnich people that are living on our homelands. Some of them have been creating groups, to learn the traditional names of, for example, Sadeas. So they created like a group to make more awareness to the local islanders about the history of that island and about who's the indigenous peoples of that island, and to create relationships with the First Nations or our people on the island. So they created educational boards on the island, or some people create space on their territory. Like if they're settlers living within our territories, they've created space for our local indigenous peoples to come and do prayers or do whatever. So there's that reciprocal, or go camping on that territory or go hunting on there or whatever, harvesting. So when we go out and have presence on our territories and they know like, oh, what, there's a Salish person on the island camp, then it generates something, and by just sharing knowledge. And I know one thing that we always say is that like for indigenous people ask us about things, but we also do say like, yes, we're willing to share, but also do your own research, but it's also important to get an indigenous perspective on history because a lot is colonial. So it might just be one way, but just being really open. And so find out where you're living and who the indigenous people are, so that you're living on their lands, I think, because as you know, in BC we are the most diverse indigenous peoples of this land, and so I think that's what I could really share about what you can do. We would have some people donate money towards our school programs. We've had people donate towards our indigenous revitalization of plants programs. There's also the funding does help, because as mentioned before, just Jaskwaan, is that we have a lot of soft funding all the time, you know, and that we do apply for these pathway grants from First Peoples Language Cultural Council. But sometimes the work is so tremendous, you know, it can be really great, as you've heard from our sharings today. But those are just some ways that I thought. And also our Sanchothan Language Immersion School, it is open. Like we've had some Cree children come into our program before. We also have had lots of Lekwungen families join our immersion program. So yeah, there it is open to children from other tribes, but of course you just have to be aware that it's coming from a Kusatnich worldview, a Sanchothan worldview, and that. So I just wanted to say that because that's been one of our goals, is to have a relationship with the islanders or settlers, and really talking hard truths about, you know, preemption laws, and you know, and unceded territories, and we never sold our lands and things like that. But at the same time creating those relationships. So we do have allies, you know, but we are still working, you know, hard at really discussing the hard history, the hard truths. And so we're always open for more ideas of how to go about that question about you know, settlers on Indigenous lands. So
Thank you. Any last words, Jaskwaan?
I'm just appreciative of this opportunity. I've learned a lot as I passed along in my chat. So how to the work that you do. My hands up to you. I know you work closely, or you know my sister Lucy Bell. She mentioned that she would have heard the panel, and that you went to school with her, and I've worked closely with her over the past 20 years in our work. So I'm really grateful to meet you this way, and hear all these parallels with our community, and also the work that's being done. And I think it's just, we can strengthen, you know, I feel strengthened by sharing today, and I just, you know, want to keep creating these types of opportunities in different ways, or for others. So again, thank you.
Oh, that's amazing, Lucy. Yes, we were the first cohort in the Masters in Indigenous Language Revitalization. We had a cohort of like, I think it was like originally 28 or something. It was crazy big, and it was a very interesting program. They cut it down to like 10 people after that, every year after. But I think the best thing about, you know, pursuing education in Indigenous language revitalization in institutions, you know, is the networking. I think that was the best gift from that journey, is being able to network with people that are like-minded and doing the same work, because it's the biggest, it's like sacrifice you do your whole life, right? And so it's a never ending work, but it's the most gratifying, the most, when you hear, you know, your students, or you hear your family, or you hear naysayers change their minds, you know, about different things, and you hear that language coming, you know, naturally, not guided, not, you know, from their own heart. I think that's the most rewarding thing that we can do. And like you mentioned before, like a lot of our communities, you know, don't have speakers anymore, and so we need to be creative, we need to be innovative, we need to, you know, do these extra things to help support. And I think about when I started in Louisa, we have a history. I was an apprentice, and my daughter was, I don't know, 18 months or something. We're out on Hunanich doing an immersion camp, and she joined us. And you know, where I was then and where I am now, you know, and just, we always say, "Awas tlak sanusa, awas tlak sanusa," you know, don't let that fire go out, you know. And we always tell our students, or especially our adult students, like, if when you're on this journey, you know, it may seem tremendous, but if you can, you know, spark that fire in one of your relatives, or your parents, or your siblings, or just a friend, you know, then it's just that, you know, you just need to nurture that fire to let it grow. And that's what the elders did for us. Because when I started, there was 12 elders at the table. There's no more elders at the table. And we have second language learning elders now that learned from those first language elders, and we have probably, I don't even like to say like this much first language elders left, and it's really hard to say that. But at the same time, our second language elders are saying, they're not worried about our language disappearing anymore, because the second language learners are growing, and we're all working toward becoming more proficient. But yeah, so Haishka, yes, and much
Thank
love.
you
Tell
so
her
much.
much love to Lucy, and hope everything's going well wherever she is, Haishka.
Thank you.
All
So
right.
we're coming to the end. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, EDÄLISIYE. Thank you, Jaskwaan, and thank you all who were in the audience. It's been an incredible journey. I think you've taken us a very long way in just over an hour. Thank you, and all our best wishes for the work that you're doing and going ahead. Thank you.
Take care.